Apologize for getting started here a minute or two late, but we're going to get going now, and we're letting people in as they connect up. So, welcome to the 2023 Tournament Umpire Training Session. Just a couple reminders that we are recording this meeting, and we'll have it available on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. But please mute your audio throughout the meeting, and we'll have some time for questions. If you have a question, please use the chat function and send it to Jim Rose, and Jim will collect the chat questions, and we'll answer those during the breaks. So what's this training all about? First of all, I want to say many of you are probably experienced umpires, and you've been through tournament umpiring in the past. So we've got a lot of content here tonight. We're not going to read all the slides. We're going to hope that you can see the information and you can grab the content for yourself. We're going to focus really only on those highlights. And in the presentation tonight, we're going to start with points of emphasis for 2023. So if you don't take anything else away from the training, take those points of emphasis away. We will talk about the rules as they apply to both tournament champions and the all-star tournaments, as well as the umpire procedures. So let's just jump right in. First of all, I want to say these three logos for the tournaments. If you're a pin collector, there are pins that match these designs, and you need to seek those out during the tournament if you're interested in getting one of these pins. So you can talk to myself or Jim or anyone else in the district staff. We might be able to connect you with one of these pins. Okay, what are points of emphasis? So these are things that throughout the years in tournament champions or all-stars, or even just in this current season, that we've seen that we want to make sure you as the umpires are aware of, things that need to be applied consistently during the games. And there's a few of those. And as I said, many of these just come from things that have happened over the years in the tournaments. We're going to talk about what happens before the game, during the game, after the game as we go through the presentation tonight. But let's start with before the game. So you've arrived at the field. What are the things that you need to make sure are happening during pregame? So a team might arrive, let's say, an hour before the game and start having their warm-up drills. Prior to the game, teams get a manager and up to two coaches are allowed on the field. So during their warm-ups, that doesn't mean, there's 4 or 5 extra practice coaches, their pitching coach, whomever's on the field. Let the tournament director resolve those extra coach issues. During Tournament of Champions only, coaches can warm up the pitchers, just like in regular season this year, where we've had adult coaches warming up pitchers. They can do that during the Tournament of Champions. But in All-Stars, coaches cannot warm up pitchers. And they can't be the catcher in between, before the game. So make sure that at All-Stars, you've got players acting as the bullpen warm-up pitcher and the catcher during infield practice. Again, prior to the game, we often see teams out doing wiffle ball, hitting drills. Make sure those players with bats, anyone who has a bat must have a batting helmet. Don't accept the answer from the coach Oh, well, they'll get the helmet on when they're up swinging the bat, with the ball. No, if they have a bat and they're in the practice area for swinging bats, they need to have a helmet. The catcher who's doing infield outfield practice near the coach must wear a catcher's helmet with the dangling throat guard. This is really all about that coach has a bat in his or her hands. They're swinging the bat. We need to have protection for that player who is providing the warm-up catcher. And we do that through the catcher's helmet. And again, the player warming up the pitcher in the bullpen must have the dangling throat guard and helmet. Now let's talk about during the game. And I know, as I said, many of you are experienced umpires, so you already know the kinds of things that happen during the game. And during regular season at your league, things may be allowed that are strictly not allowed by the rule book or by procedures here in District 4. So during the game, the team can only have one manager and two coaches. So that's 3 total. That doesn't mean they can have another coach like sitting right outside the dugout or standing by the dugout. We're talking one manager and 2 coaches. Then most importantly is there must always be an adult in the dugout whenever there are players or one player or multiple players in the dugout. How does this play out? I'll give you a couple examples. The team is on offense, so they have an adult in each coaching box. And now the manager who happens to be in the dugout wants to make some sort of substitution change that requires them to come out of the dugout. Let's say they want to do a courtesy runner. So they come to the dugout gate, they ask for time, and they come out and approach the umpire. No. That one adult who's ever left must be in the dugout. Another example is coaches want to come out and pick up bats, in between batters. No, we're not doing that. Coach, you need to be in the dugout because we need one adult at all times. Okay, let's keep moving on here during the game. TOC and future stars. Coaches may warm up the pitcher during the game. So in between innings, just as we've done in regular season this year, the coach can come out and warm up the pitcher in between innings. But in All-Stars, no, it must be a player who's doing the warming up of a pitcher. And then consistent with, coaches and managers being in the dugout during live action, there's only 3 places. There's only 2 places that a coach or manager can be. They can be inside the dugout. That means fully inside the dugout, not standing in the opening, sitting in buckets, feet outside on the dirt, or they can be in a coach's box. Those are the only 2 places they can be during live action. So don't let the manager tell you, hey, we can't communicate with our catcher because the dugout, let's say at Alameda Little League, doesn't allow me, it's too far away for me to communicate with my catcher. Sorry, you need to be in the dugout. During the game, offensive base coaches, they need to be in the dugout until the warm-ups are done. And our way of helping you judge that is when the catcher throws the ball down or the final warm-up pitch is completed. That's when coaches can take their position in the coaching box. And it's very important. This instruction is, and the rule says, coaches must remain in the dugout. And what I would like to encourage you to do is, if they're an adult, right, they can be hanging around the dugout entrance. What we don't want them to do is to come. If they're the third base coach and they're in the third base dugout, we do not want them to come up to the coach's box. And we don't want them to come down and hang out around home plate And what they'll tell you is, oh, I'm just trying to speed up the game. Well, they're going to speed up the game until they get hit with an errant warm-up pitch or a warm-up throw. So keep them in or very close to the dugout. Gates are always closed on dugouts. And here's one that's really important. Do not allow players to handle bats in the dugout until they are ready to come to it at bat, or they're coming out to be the on-deck batter in intermediate or junior or senior levels. So that means the player can't, if the on-deck batter in a lower division, they're standing in the dugout holding the bat. No, just put the bat down, put it in the bat rack, wherever. And when you come out of the dugout, you can pick up the bat and come up to the batter's box. A couple more points of emphasis during a game. The rules say that managers, coaches, and players are not to converse with fans or parents or interact with them in any way. So if this becomes an issue where you think it's interfering with the conduct of the dugout, or the way the game is proceeding, don't let it happen. Let the tournament director deal with a spectator who's trying to talk to the players or coaches. Parents, fans, and extra coaches not in the dugout may not relay information. So this means, let's say you have a parent who's videoing the game and they see a play and they run to the manager and they say, oh, the video shows the umpire got it wrong. Don't let that happen. We don't want information passed to someone who's not a game participant. What do we do about phones and other electronic devices? Basically, you can have a scorebook in the dugout. That scorebook can be a paper scorebook. It can be an electronic scorebook. If the scorebook is outside of the dugout, you can't, consistent with these guidance, you can't have that scorekeeper telling the manager who's coming up next, or how many pitches have been thrown by that pitcher. That communication can't happen. The advice is, hey, manager, keep a scorebook in your dugout. And you as the umpire shouldn't talk to that scorekeeper. You should only talk to the official scorekeeper, who's provided by the tournament director. During the game, how do we keep things moving? I'm not going to cover these in detail. The guidelines are 1 minute from the last out until when the batter comes and steps into the batter's box to start the next inning. 1 minute is what the rules say. We all know 1 minute is probably not achievable, but 5 minutes is 5 times 1 minute. It's way too long. So practice some of these things on this slide to keep things going. The quickest way is to limit the warm-up pitches. And if they don't get any warm-up pitches in 1 minute, that's the next inning, they'll be out there faster. I started talking about cell phones. Here's some guidelines on cell phones. Basically, there are no cell phones allowed on the field of play. Remember that. Tell the coach, keep your cell phone in your pocket. I don't want to see it. If they're scorekeeping, that's okay in the dugout, but not in the coach's box. Some more points of emphasis. You as the umpires are required by the rules to verify that all equipment being used in the game meets Little League standards prior to the start of the game. We do that by inspecting equipment. We're going to inspect bats, making sure that they meet the appropriate standard for the level of play. And we're going to look for damage. We're going to look at all the batting helmets, making sure they're properly certified. They don't have excessive stickers, paint, damaged padding or inappropriate cheek guards. I hope you've been doing this during the regular season, so it shouldn't be something that you're not used to doing already. The same with catcher's helmets. We're going to look for the same kinds of things. Most importantly, we're going to find out if that helmet has a dangling throat guard. It's surprising how we get several weeks into the season, we do our equipment inspection, and we don't have a dangling throat guard on the catcher's helmet. And the answer from the manager is, the league never gave me one. Well, the league's getting the same instruction that you're getting tonight. So make sure that dangling throat guard is on that catcher's helmet. Excuse me. If you find any equipment's defective, just make sure it goes out of the dugout and it goes to the tournament director, who will make sure it gets back to the team after the game. I'm not going to cover this in detail. You should be very familiar with the bat standards. I will tell you that how I do it is, if a bat in intermediate and below has a USA bat stamp on it, I'm 100% confident that it will not exceed 33 inches and it will not exceed 2 5/8. I've looked at several manufacturers' online catalogs and I have confidence. So I'm not always looking for the length of the bat and checking the size. And the same with the BB Core standard. There essentially are no BB Core bats that are larger than 34 inches because the weight, they're too heavy beyond that. So use that as a bit of a guide, but make sure the bats are properly labeled. And the same with softball bats, make sure that the standards are upheld regarding the labeling and the bat performance. Moving on some other areas of points of emphasis, lineup changes. And this may be in a limited situation, since we'll talk more about how the batting order is constructed for each division of play. But generally remember that offensive changes, and the only place you're really going to have an offensive change where there's a change in the batting order, they could only be, you might only have that in senior division. Could be if you had an injured player, but those changes can only be made when the player is coming to bat, or let's say they're entering a courtesy runner or a special pinch runner. But defensive changes are made when the player enters the field. So what's important for you to know here is that this is when the player actually enters, when you might need to be determining mandatory play or some other situation regarding that player. Unannounced substitutes happen. So we're hoping our scorekeepers are keeping track of who's out there on the field, regardless of whether they're told by us or the manager. Just to remind you all, as the umpire, we're going to ask you to keep a lineup card. We'll talk about lineup cards a bit later in the presentation. We need you to keep track of pitching changes. Anytime a pitcher changes, baseball and softball. Keep track of catcher changes in baseball. Keep track of substitutions at the senior level. So when we're changing out in the batting order. Keep track of special pinch runners or courtesy runners at the levels where those apply. And keep track of offensive timeouts and defensive visits. And you'll see our lineup cards will allow you to keep track of that easily. So special conditions are a pitcher is removed from the mound or removed from the pitching circle in softball, and you need to know whether that player actually left the defensive position and went onto the bench, because those will determine whether that player can actually come back and be a pitcher again. So at these levels of play, it's important to remember that. At majors and below, Major Baseball and below, a player removed can't return as a pitcher. Player removed as a pitcher can't return as a pitcher. But in these levels, if they stay in the game, they may actually, if they stay on defense, they may be returned. Mandatory play is a special consideration in All-Stars and TOC. In TOC, we need to track the mandatory play because it's 6 defensive outs and 1 time at bat. So the managers will be working with the scorekeepers, who will have a special form to keep track of when players were actually in the field on defense and when they weren't. You as the umpire don't really need to be taking all these defensive changes. However, you may see that the manager will be letting the scorekeeper know which players are not out on defense during that half inning. And then this example of the form that may be used to keep track of that. Once again, I just want to remind you, pace of game is critical. My personal goal for a 6-inning game should be 90 minutes. 90 minutes. So if any of you have had a 90-minute game in regular season, congratulations. You've met my expectation for pace of game. Lots of reasons why they can't go 90 minutes. But if we do these things, limiting the warm-ups, encouraging catchers ready, get that first batter out there, have players retrieve bats, don't let foul balls come back onto the field, and get substitutions and other changes reported promptly. We'll get those games done in 90 minutes. The last point of emphasis I have for you, I want to talk about your role as the umpire and how we'd like you to interact with the managers and coaches. The umpire is not a unique special participant in Little League baseball and softball. You're just one of the game participants who have the role of making it a safe and fun game for our players. So here's a list of like 7 things I'd like you to think about and to actually attempt to implement in your game. Respect the managers and coaches. Expect that they will respect you. It can start by being friendly and engaging with them from the point of time when you first engage them prior to the game. Use first names. Hey, coach is not good enough. Hey, Don is much better. And if they call you, hey, Blue, just remind them, hey, my name is Jim. Okay, it's just a matter of respect. Be approachable. Don't be that umpire that says, I've got nothing for you. It was my call. I've got it right. If they want to ask you a question, let them ask the question. The other is there's lots of things that happen on the field of play. Be careful. Don't look for things that are really not going to change the way the game is being played. The safety issue, absolutely. Dirty sticks, those are to be cleaned up by the ground crew after the game, not by you as the umpire. Okay? Make that manager successful. Don't coach his or her players. Let the manager do that. Let the manager know if there's something that they should be aware of in between innings. Don't eject game participants unnecessarily. If you move somebody out of the game, if it's a player, right? They've lost the opportunity to learn from whatever behavior you're trying to address in the game. They're gone from the dugout. They can't, they can't celebrate with their teammates, winning or losing. Now, if it's something that deserves to be ejection, then you have to do that. But I'm encouraging you to be very cautious on ejections and use some of these other techniques in the earlier 5 bullets to minimize ejections. It's just a game. It's a game for you. It's a game for the players. It's a game for the managers, game for the spectators. Real quick, what do we do about managing spectators on the other side of the fence? Lots of disruptions. I'm not going to cover what kind of disruptions can happen. Your job is to handle what goes on inside the fence. The tournament director takes care of everything outside. If something's happening during the game, try to get to the tournament director. Don't stop the game, make a big deal out of it unnecessarily, but let's keep the game moving. But if events escalate, we do have the security of Rule 901G, which allows us to stop the game, put both teams in the dugout. Then you tell the managers why the game is suspended. And not until everything is safe and secure, if you will, outside the fence, do we restart the game. So I hope that's clear on how we want you to interact with spectators. Okay, Jim, do we have questions?
Yes, Don, we have a couple of questions. Only one manager and 2 coaches. Does the TD resolve problems around this?
Yes, so the way the process will work, depending upon if it's TOC or All-Stars, when that team arrives, the tournament director will determine who the manager and their 2 coaches are. And they will, they will attempt to control who has access to the field. Of course, we all know that's tough to do, or the team may arrive, well before the tournament director has met with them. So it's a TD responsibility. If you see it, go up to the tournament director, tell them, hey, I see 5 adults out here. I don't know who their coaches are. Can you resolve that? The tournament director may say, hey, I need a little help. I'm doing this other thing right now. And you may approach the manager and say, hey, I see you have 5, you have 5 adults. You really only can have 3. And hopefully that will resolve it. Okay, any other questions, Jim?
Yes, this question came in right before you actually addressed it, but it's probably good to reemphasize it. Some coaches on the field use their phone for game changer. Is that allowed?
So the interpretation that we've asked you to follow is on the field, outside the dugout, phones cannot be used for any purpose. Okay, so that means in the coach's box, no, they cannot follow game changer in the coach's box. Inside the dugout, yes. I mean, I guess it's the way I'll describe it is who uses game changer when they're driving their car, or who, so they've got a job to do in the coach's box, and lots of things are happening, and looking at their phone is not one of the ways to maintain order on the playing field. Okay.
Okay. In terms of the manager not being able to speak with the scorekeeper, the exception is the official scorekeeper, correct?
Yeah, we covered that kind of quickly, but managers should have questions about pitch count or other things. They need to approach the official scorekeeper. And the right way to do that, again, remember, so managers and coaches, remember what I said earlier about managers and coaches are really only supposed to be in two places, in the dugout or in a coach's box. That means they're not supposed to come down to the scorekeeper. What should happen is they should say, hey, Bill, I need to get a pitch count. And you may say, okay, come down to the scorekeeper. Or they've got a question. Hey, I want to make a substitution. So interact with the managers to make sure that you know why they're going to the scorekeeper. So that also helps explain. They come out of the dugout and they wander halfway down, and now they're talking to some person in the grandstands, 30 feet from home plate. Well, that's not the official scorekeeper. So you will have a way of helping do that. And how do you manage that? You go up to the manager and you say, hey, John, I really need you back by the dugout. Yeah, do you have something that you need to take care of here? Right. Again, working professionally and with respect, not, hey, John, get back to the dugout. Right. So that's my advice on that.
Okay, we have two further questions. There's a question about a courtesy runner, but you will be covering that later in the presentation, so we'll hold on that one. The other question is, you mentioned that the umpire can speak to the coach in between innings. Can you give an example or two of what the umpire may share with a coach?
Yeah, an example that recently happened to me. A batter released the bat on backswing unsafely. We might call it through the bat, but that bat was released. Well, there's really no penalty for that by the rules, but in between innings, we might go down. We might, hey, John, come here. I got something for you, and I'm just going to talk to him quietly. Said, hey, you're number 5. Release the bat during that last at bat. Can you talk to him, make sure he knows how to release the bat properly? That's one example. So it's those kinds of things, right, that you might be able to improve the flow of the game. Or you might go to him and say, hey, your catcher's really taking a long time to get out in between innings. I'm going to have to, stop giving you any warm-up pitches. Can you help us all out and get your catcher going here? Or get somebody out here to warm up the pitcher? Don't stand down by home plate yelling at the dugout, hey, let's get somebody out here, right? Help the manager, help him learn how to coach his players better and get the team ready. So there's a couple examples.
Okay, Don, that's the end of these
All right.
questions.
Okay, great. So those are points of emphasis. Remember I said, hey, if you don't take anything else away, you can take away points of emphasis. We're going to launch into some rule discussions now, and we're going to cover tournament champions rules first, and then we're going to cover all-star rules. We're only going to cover those things that are significantly different, if you will, or that might be different from what you've been using in your local league for each of these levels. We're not going to cover everything in the playing rules. We're confident that if you've been umpiring during the regular season, that you know the rules and you know how they apply to the game. So TOC, tournament champions, they played under the official rules for baseball and softball, except where the District 4 interleague rules are modified, and a couple other minor changes. So again, if you're not familiar with the interleague rules, you can find those on the District 4 website under either baseball or softball. And don't let the tournament director or the managers tell you something different, that we're going to play this game differently than those rules. And there should be ground rules for each field you play at. These are kind of the levels. You can see we have 8 different tournaments going on in TOC over a 6-day period. So a lot of baseball and softball in a very short time period. So let's just launch right into TOC rules for baseball and softball. We covered this already, but again, number of adult coaches. They can have 3, a manager and 2 coaches. And number of players. You can play with 8 players. You can play with more than 8. You can play with 8. You can't play with less than 8. The game is suspended if less than 8. Mandatory play. Mandatory play is basically in each and every game, each player must meet these mandatory play requirements. So first of all, a player must bat once and play 6 defensive outs. Doesn't have to be consecutive outs, 6 defensive outs. In minor baseball and softball, we have limited number of runs per inning. So you might ask yourself, well, how do I get 6 defensive outs if they don't get any outs in an inning because they scored 5 runs? Well, those 5 runs counts as 3 defensive outs. And then if we have a team with 15 players at that game, mandatory play is only 3 defensive outs in these higher levels of play, not in the lower levels. Here's an important issue for you to know as the umpire, especially when a manager wants to remove them for some sort of pinch runner, a courtesy runner or special pinch runner, depending on the level of play. If it's the first time that player has come into the batter's box in the game, mandatory play requirement for the at-bat is only completed when they come in with no count, or they are retired as a batter, retired as a runner, reaches base, scores, or the inning or the game ends. So let's take a couple examples. One example might be a batter is batting and they're injured. So now in continuous batting order, the next batter comes in, but there was already a count on the batter. So that time at bat doesn't count for the second batter, and it didn't count for the batter who was injured. Another situation, the batter gets on base and the manager say there are 2 outs and it's the pitcher. They want to put a courtesy runner in. Can't do that the first time the player has come up to bat. So read through these and understand those. There's a couple other special ones. I'm not going to go through these. You can see that what we need to be doing in TOC is making sure that players are batting, they're completing their at bat, and those are handled properly. The batting order in TOC for baseball at all levels, juniors and below, is continuous batting order, which means every player who's at the game is going to be in the batting order. At softball, majors and minors is continuous batting order. Seniors will bat a 9-position batting order. So because we're batting continuous, all players are starters, and you can have defensive substitutions freely. They can come in and out. You still need to meet the mandatory play of 6 defensive outs throughout the game. In senior softball, I don't want to cover this too much because there's a very limited number of senior softball games. But basically, we're using the substitution rules that apply, and the player's been removed, can come back in, but only in that position in the batting order. Okay, we're going to move on from this. How do we end the game? So most of your leagues have probably adopted this rule where the game will be conceded by the team that's behind to the team that's ahead if the team that's ahead is ahead by 15 runs after 3 innings, 10 runs after 4, or 8 runs after 5 in major, minor baseball, and softball. And if the home team's ahead, you know, obviously the bottom half of that 3rd, 4th, or 5th inning doesn't need to be played. In the intermediate junior baseball and senior softball, it's just 1 additional inning, 15 after 4, 10 after 5, 8 after 6. This is not optional. This is not one of these things where the managers can say, oh, let us play. No, the game is over. There are no time limits during Tournament of Champions. Now, in the regular season and District 4 interleague play, we had time limits. There are no time limits for TOC. We're doing this because we want the games to be completed. If we had time limits, we would have issues where games had to be suspended. And then what do we do when there's no winner? Also, because we want to have the players have the, you know, the maximum amount of playing time. What happens if the game can't be determined because it's tied, or it's not a regulation game? We're going to follow the rules that apply in the rule books in the about suspended games. Most importantly, if it's a regulation game, so let's say it has gone 4 innings in majors baseball, we're in the 5th, and the 5th inning can't be completed. We're going to go back to the 4th inning. So that's his last bullet. Hopefully we won't have any suspended games that cause disruptions and where a visiting team has gone ahead and we have to go back to the prior inning. So again, the need to keep games moving, especially the weeknight games, so we don't have games called for darkness. TOC rules about foot in the batter's box. I know many leagues do not use this rule, but during TOC at all levels of baseball and major and senior softball, the rule on keeping 1 foot in the batter's box during the bat will be enforced. And then the 3rd strike not caught rule, as the rule books describe, only at majors and above does this rule apply. Courtesy runners. So courtesy runner, pitcher, catcher with 2 outs, all baseball and softball except minor softball. And then we have special pitch runner rules for senior softball, and you can see what the conditions are. These are called out in the rule book on the rule for special pitch runner. Why only senior softball? They're the only level using a 9-player batting order. Stealing of signs. Just for you to be aware of, if you see a situation where you think that signs are being relayed improperly, stealing, you need to stop it. And the way we want you to do that is warn the person that is stealing the signs. If another instance of it happens, that person will be ejected. So let's take a situation. runner at second base is picking up the signs from the catcher on what the pitch is going to be, and they're relaying those to the batter. Well, that individual player at second is the one who's being unsportsmanlike, not the batter, not the manager, not the coach. But they could be relaying those signs to the manager, who's then relaying them to the batter. Or let's say the manager or coach in the dugout is picking up the offensive signals from the third base coaching box and relaying those to the pitcher. So we're not going to have any of that. In all the games that I've done, I haven't seen this be an issue, but I just want you to be aware of how we would like you to enforce the rules. Okay, TOC protest. What is a protest? Protest is when the manager of one team wants to object to a certain call or play that happened. And the reasons that they can protest are improper number of bases awarded, the rules were improperly interpreted and applied, there was a mandatory play violation, or a player or a pitcher is ineligible. They can't protest your judgment. They may not like it, but they can't technically protest it. They can't protest your decisions on equipment, ejections, or if another pitch or play has happened after the play they're wanting to protest. So what we want you to do is, if a manager protests, comes out to you as the umpire and says, you talk about the play, and then the manager says, well, I still don't like the call, I want to protest it. Fine, the game will stop. And it gets handed off to the tournament director. So the protest will be made in accordance with the rule. You can read the rule in detail. The umpires will get together. You probably already talked about the play, and you'll again reinforce the decision. The manager doesn't like it. They may say, hey, I still don't like your call. I want to protest it on this basis. And you, as the umpire in charge of the game, will make sure you get clarity from the manager as to what exactly are they protesting. This is very important because you need to get the manager to be very clear on whether it was a rule interpretation or some other situation. And then that will get relayed to the tournament director. The tournament director is the decider on protests. They might use a protest committee. They may come to you, the umpires, and ask for input on what's the rule. Fine, help the tournament director, but don't make the decision for the tournament director. They may make the wrong decision on a protest. They may make the right decision. Whatever, after they decide, just play on, whatever the decision was. Very important, make sure we respect the manager's right to protest, and that you get clarity from the manager on what they are protesting, and it's handled expeditiously so we don't delay the game unnecessarily. All right, let's move on real quick. Baseball rules. So there are some specific expectations around baseballs. We don't have to have tournament balls. We can use regular season balls. My answer to this is whatever ball they bring you, play the game. As long as it's not a T-ball, right? Or a low impact ball. There's a bunch of rules that are all the same. We're not going to cover those again. You've been umpiring throughout the season. These are all rules you should have been applying already. So this list is there for you to be able to reference and catch up on special rules. There's some pitching rules for softball. The manager should know these rules. There are limits at the minor division of softball that they can only pitch 3 innings in a game. At the major division, they can pitch 12 innings. Well, a game is 6 innings, but allows them to continue pitching in an extra inning game. But then they need to have rest after that. And then there's limits on, depending on how many they've pitched in that game, on how many innings they can pitch in the next game. And similarly with senior softball, there's less restrictions. And there is a maximum of 12 per game, with some restrictions if they pitch more than 6 innings in a game. Everything else is the same as regular season. Just as a reminder, for those of you doing softball, the circle violation rule, improper disengaging of the base in softball. When the pitcher has the ball in the pitching circle, the runner is on a base, in contact with the base, that runner may not disengage from the base until the ball reaches the batter or is struck in minor division. Or in majors and senior, the pitcher releases the ball. If you're doing TOC softball, you may find in a game that the teams had not had these rules enforced during the regular season, just because of how their games were executed in their home league. These are the rules. The softball managers will have these rules reinforced to them, but just as a reminder on the differences between minors and majors and seniors. Okay, we blew through TOC rules there pretty quickly, Jim, but are there any questions on TOC rules?
Don, we have a couple of questions. First one, senior softball, are they allowed DH flex?
Senior softball has the DH availability as defined. I think it's in Rule 3, right, Jim, around game preliminaries and creating the lineup. There is no flex position in Little League softball.
The DH rule is covered in 3.03 Senior League Designated Hitter Rule.
Right.
How many times can a courtesy runner be used for a catcher during a game?
In TOC, you can have unlimited use of the courtesy runner. 2 outs for pitcher or catcher.
Okay. And our final
courtesy, remember, so we didn't cover this because the rules define it, but in continuous batting order division, the courtesy runner that's going to go and replace the catcher or pitcher is the player who made the last out. Okay, so it's not someone that the manager just selects. It is the player who made the last out.
Okay. Final question. Is the TD keeping track of the pitcher's inning limitations?
So at each game, the team will bring a pitching log that will indicate the players that pitched in the prior game, how many pitches they pitched, or if it's in softball, how many innings they pitched. And that will be available to the tournament director and the scorekeeper. And of course, you will have got pitching restrictions. We'll talk about how to handle your pregame with the managers, but you will know who those players are who have pitching restrictions. One thing I want to emphasize is that pitching restrictions are a critical element of Little League safety program. So all game participants are obligated to prevent situations where players, improper pitchers, if you will, are brought into on the mound or into the pitching circle. So tournament directors, scorekeepers, umpires, managers will all be instructed that if something is happening where an illegal pitcher is being brought in, or a pitcher has reached a pitch count limit, that they're supposed to stop the game to prevent the game from continuing.
Those are all our questions, Don.
All right, great. All right, let's move on to All-Stars. Again, there's those really cool pins. If you really like pins, you might be able to get a couple of those. So I'm not going to cover this in detail, but the All-Star tournaments are a little different, right? It's for Little League Baseball, it's what we see from Williamsport, Pennsylvania, the last weekend in August, right? And it's, we all watch that on ESPN or wherever, all through the month of August. So it is really something different from the regular season, if you will. The tournaments are all about having fun, extending the season, and allowing those players who are part of All-Stars to have more fun, play at different locations, and see different skill levels. But it truly is about winning. And so that's where the conflict often comes in during these games, where the fun part of playing is left behind, and we're all about winning. So there are multiple levels, and we're part of Northern California, and eventually some numbers of teams win and ended up going to a World Series. And there are official rules for tournament play. And those are established by the tournament committee, which is made up of senior officers of Little League Baseball, in their offices in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. So we're going to play these games strictly under those rules only. And the rules we're going to cover are different from regular season rules. There's a bunch of levels of play. I won't want to cover this. One point I want to emphasize is that levels of play are age specific. So even though, say, in regular season, you had a senior league softball team, you could have a junior league softball all-star team, or you had players that played Little League Baseball division majors. Let's say you played in your major division in baseball, they could play on the intermediate all-star team if they were the right age. So these are age-specific divisions. Little League does not call these U10, U11, U12, U14, and I would ask that you not use that verbiage in your discussions either. All right, so let's rock and roll on All-Star rules. And just remember, in the back of the rule book, well, I don't know where the back of the rule book is when the rule book's on your phone in an app, but in the latter parts of the rule book, there's a whole section on tournament playing rules. And on some of these slides, there's some areas where we pointed out new rules or changes for 2023. So remember, this is for All-Stars only. Number of coaches. They can have a manager and 2 coaches. So for those of you who've been around a while, you remember we used to limit the number of coaches based on how many players were on the team. That rule is gone. You can now have a full complement of a manager and 2 coaches. However, now number of players, even though in TOC we said 8, no, you have to have 9 to play in All-Stars. 9 or more. Equipment, the baseballs, they must be tournament baseballs, RST baseballs. We shouldn't have an issue with this. But again, if you go to your game and the only baseballs that are available are an RS ball, not a tournament ball in baseball, and you're doing 8-10 baseball, play the game. or you're doing junior baseball and they give you a ball that says Little League on it. It doesn't say Senior Little League. Play the game. Let me know later that, hey, the proper balls weren't available at that game site. But the reality is there are differences between the regular season ball and the tournament ball designated by RST. And there are some differences between the ball marked Little League and the ball marked Senior Little League, but not enough to make difference that we're going to hold up a game. And in softball, just like in the regular season, where we used a smaller ball in minors for the 8-10 division, which is mostly players who played in minor softball divisions in regular season, they're going to use that 11-inch ball. In the 9-11 and older ages, they're going to use the 12-inch ball. Illegal bats. What happens? This rule has been around for several seasons. Basically is if an illegal bat is brought in, remember, an illegal bat is one that's been altered or it doesn't meet the specifications for that level of play. It's not a bat that's damaged. Damaged bats and illegal bats are different. But a player comes into the batter's box with an illegal bat and it's discovered before the next batter comes up, you can see what happens. The player's out, the manager and that player are ejected. Now we're down to only 2 adults or 1 adult. We're down to 1 manager and 1 coach for the team because the manager was ejected, and the bat is removed and given to the tournament director. So if we've done our job before the game and we've found all the illegal bats, how could this happen? Well, we all know how it happens is somebody slips a bat to a player after the game has started, or a bat that was cleaned before the game, the player applies pine tar or other sticky substance to the bat in the dugout prior to them coming up to bat. So we just want to remember this rule about illegal bats. With the new bat standard, this shouldn't be an issue. Continuous batting order for all levels of play in softball and baseball, except senior level, we will be using the continuous batting order. So every player that's at the game site at the beginning of the game will be in the batting order. So if we're using continuous batting order, what do we do about mandatory play? So unlike TOC and unlike regular season, the only mandatory play is that that player at the game be in the batting order and bats in that order. There's no requirement to play on defense. We have free substitution on defense. And if there is a problem with a batter who's batting improperly, that's a batting out of turn issue. Players who come late can get added if they need to leave the game or they're sick, whatever. We're going to skip over them. What I would caution you is this is a new rule for 2023. There are some who might suggest there will be managers who will try to take advantage of this by either one, limiting the size of their team, or so they don't have players just added onto the roster who aren't good batters, right? Or that they will fake injury or illness of a player. So I personally don't have those concerns. Well, let's see how it goes this season throughout the All-Star period. What do we do about a player that does get injured? So players running the base, they get injured. We take the player who made the last out and we insert them for that player who's injured and unable to run the bases. But what if the player we put in now is as the last out is the pitcher or catcher and there's 2 outs? Well, the manager can elect to use a courtesy runner. And now since the mandatory play requirement is only that they be in the batting order, there is no requirement that they complete a time at bat. So as we talked about in TOC, if they come up to bat the first time they're batting, they get on base, we can now put in a courtesy runner for them. I realize this is a little complicated. I think it's easy to remember. 1, we have continuous batting order. 2, there is no mandatory defensive play. And C, just like today, if we had in regular season with continuous batting, if a player's injured or sick or whatever, we're going to skip over them, or we're going to use the player who made the last out to replace them on the bases. So what does that mean for you as an umpire in continuous batting order? You don't have to track defensive substitutions any longer. So, remember that the amount of time we spent with the manager coming to you, telling them I'm going to put these 3 players in, you were tracking mandatory play. We're not doing that. You still need to track pitching changes, and you need to know about catching changes so we can avoid problems with pitcher to catcher, catcher to pitcher. And then in softball, we need to track the pitchers, as we talked about in TOC, right? The issue of pitchers who leave the game defensively not being able to return to the mound or to the circle, right? So your responsibility in tracking substitutions is significantly less. Senior baseball and softball. So bat 9, we have regular starters and substitutes according to those rules. Designated hitter position is allowed with the normal restrictions, but there is no mandatory play in senior baseball and softball. And substitutions in senior level, starter removed may re-enter once, but only in the same spot in the batting order, and the substitute removed cannot re-enter. So at these levels of play, we shouldn't have too many issues. The managers are experienced and understand how substitutions work at senior level. How do I end a game in All-Stars? So unlike the regular season rule or our TOC rule, the only way we're going to end a game for run rules is 15 runs after 3 or 10 runs after 8. There is no 8 runs after 5. And again, at the older levels, it's just add 1 inning to that. There's no time limits. Games are played to completion. And there are some curfews by rule. If we get to these curfew levels, we've all done something improper. So the latest game we have is starting at 5:30. And if a game can't get over by midnight, we've had some problem. But if we do have a game that has to be suspended, let's say we have a night game started at 5:30, it's gone till 8 o'clock, it's too dark. So if in a regulation game, the visiting team ties or goes ahead in the top half, but we can't complete the inning and the home team is still batting, the game is suspended. It doesn't go back like we talked about in Tournament Champions. Now we've got a tie game that just keeps going on. We've had this rule for a couple of years. Some call it the international tiebreaker. This is the Little League way to handle tie games. The 7th inning in Little League levels, you will play as normal. In the 8th inning, or at the older age level, at the 9th inning, we play one additional inning. The following inning, the batter scheduled to bat last will be placed on second base. So this is important. This is not the player who made the last out in the prior inning. It is the player who is scheduled to bat last. So confirm that with the scorekeeper. That player is placed at second base to start the inning. Point of emphasis for you is that player does not go and position themselves on second base until all the warm-ups are done. So when the coaches come out to take their position in the coach's box, that is the point in time in which that runner can go and take their position at second base. And again, all the rules about courtesy runners and special pinch runners and those things can be applied to that runner who's at second base. Quick cover up on points of emphasis again, put in the batter's box. There is a tournament rule about put in the batter's box, TR3A. You can read through this. It's pretty similar to the regular season rule. It's enforced. But if that catcher doesn't catch the pitch directly, or the pitcher comes down off the mound or leaves the circle in softball, you are not to apply this penalty to the batter. And third strike not caught is at all levels except 8-10 levels of softball and baseball. Courtesy runners in all-stars. Junior level and below. Courtesy runner allowed for pitcher or catcher when there are 2 outs. The courtesy runner is the player who made the last out. Remember, this is a continuous batting order divisions. In the senior level, special pinch runners. They're limited once an inning, twice in a game. You can have a special pinch runner, and a player can only be run for once. Again, the stealing of signs rule is applied, just as we talked about it in TOC. All-star protests. Again, what is a protestable situation? Awarding of bases. Ball went out of play, you awarded 1 base. The manager thinks it should be 2 bases. Rules interpretation. You made an infield fly call, and the manager thinks it's not an infield fly situation. You interpreted the rule wrong. Mandatory play violation. Or an ineligible pitcher. Pitcher has gone beyond their allowed number of pitches for the day. What's not protestable, the same things we talked about in TOC, your judgment, your decisions on usable equipment. You ejected somebody, they can't protest that you improperly ejected someone, and it must happen before the next pitcher play. How is all-star protest different? Again, consistent with the rules. When a protest stops, when a protest is filed, all play stops. And we don't continue the game until the protest is resolved. We don't do like in the regular season where we'll just note that, okay, the manager protested, we're going to keep playing, then the protest committee will meet in 2 days and decide what to do. Can't do that. We don't have 2 days to worry about the game. So make sure action stops when there is a protest. Again, same thing as we talked about in TOC. when the manager says, I protest your decision, not I question your decision, can you get help? Or I think you made the wrong call. Now you can actually help the manager by saying, hey, we've already talked about our call. I've given you some information. Do you want to formally protest our decision? You can do that to speed the process up and let the manager off the hook. He's supposed to know the protest procedure, but we can speed it up. Once they do say, yes, I protest, make sure you get, again, what exactly are you protesting, John? And make them be very specific and limit your discussion and further decision to only what they are suggesting they are protesting. They may think there's 5 things that you made wrong, but get them to limit it to the one they're protesting. They may protest 5 times, but let's focus on the one they're protesting right now. We're going to get the umpires together. You're going to say, John is protesting that we improperly applied the infield fly rule. You're going to make a decision with you and your crewmates. The game umpire in charge, the one who led the plate meeting, is going to announce the decision. If the manager still tells you, I don't like your call, I don't like that decision, then you will tell the tournament director, the manager's protest is this, and they do not accept our decision. Tournament directors are going to be trained to contact our district administrator, or if they can't get a hold of the district administrator, they're going to call the West Region headquarters where someone will answer the phone. West Region will handle the protest. And if the decision of West Region is not accepted by the manager, it will go to the tournament committee in Williamsport. Now, don't ask me who answers the phone in Williamsport or how the process works, but decisions do come back. Now the decision has happened. What if the other manager doesn't like the decision? Well, they could technically protest, but it's already been decided. So that's going to be kind of futile. Okay, I'm going to speed through some sections here on baseball specific rules. Pitching. All the regular season rules about pitching apply in terms of number of pitches, days rest, the catcher-pitcher interactions, pitching thresholds in terms of if I start a batter and I complete the number of pitches during that batter, that a threshold might apply based on how many I had at the start of that batter with my first pitch to that batter. Or can I pitch? I can't pitch in 3 consecutive days. And then re-entry rules, as we've talked about in some divisions, where a pitcher can come back to the pitcher's plate. In softball, just for clarity, right, depending upon what you had in regular season age groups, these are age-specific all-star divisions again. So at the 8 to 10, they're going to pitch from 35 feet. And then for the 9 to 12-year-olds will pitch from 40, and juniors and seniors will pitch from 43. And there are some specific limits on calendar days of rest for 12-year-olds and younger. You can see those here, the maximum number of pitches in a day, and then can they return? No pitching restrictions in junior, senior softball, except to be aware that they can return to the pitcher's circle, but only once in the same inning. And just for awareness, the circle violation regulation, again, is the same as what we talked about in TOC, except the application here, again, consistent with, as I said earlier, that the 8 to 10-year-old divisions made up primarily of players who played in minor softball. At that age level, the ball must reach the batter or is struck before they can disengage the base. And the all other divisions is they can leave when the pitch is released. I'm going to quickly cover a couple Future Stars tournament rules, and then we will take a question. So what's Future Stars? Future Stars is a tournament that's run in District 4 for leagues that want to enter a second all-star team, if you will, in the 9 to 11 age group or the 8 to 10 age group. And several leagues are taking advantage of that, and we have games in the Future Stars tournament. For you umpires, I see this as an excellent way to get, if you've never umpired in the tournaments before, to get an opportunity to umpire a tournament game in an environment where perhaps the desire to win is not overriding the fun aspect as much as it might be in the international all-star tournaments, because no one goes beyond this tournament. They don't win this tournament and then have a chance to play at the next level against teams from surrounding districts. So that's primarily the difference. We're going to play these using the all-star tournament rules, just like we've talked about, except that in Future Stars, we're going to let a coach warm up a pitcher before and during the game, and protests will be decided by that tournament director at the game site. So those are the two primary changes. Okay, Jim. We blew through that. We blew through All Stars in 30 minutes. What questions have we got?
Okay. So just to make sure, no defensive play required in All Stars?
That is correct. The only mandatory play in All Stars is that for juniors and below, a player who is at the game must be listed in the batting order and must bat in that batting order, consistent with what I said about injuries, ejections, other things that cause them to be removed from the game. At senior levels, there is no mandatory play, offensively or defensively.
Okay. Are there limits on courtesy runner substitutions in All Stars?
No. Remember, the courtesy runner is the player who made the last out. So they can't really game it in terms of, they've got a fast player that they always want to put out there as the courtesy runner. Doesn't work that way. The intent of the courtesy runner is, one, if it's the catcher, to get the catcher back to the dugout and have them put on their equipment so that we have 1 minute between the inning. It's not to get the catcher back to the dugout to cheer the players along. And the intent of the pitcher, right, is to give the pitcher the opportunity to get back to the dugout, get a little break, and to get ready to immediately go out and take the mound for their warm-ups. We're not going to have delays with pitchers and catchers trying to find their equipment.
Okay. This is a question about tie games that go to the second inning being tied and using the batter who is batting last being placed on second base. How is it determined the last batter in a new inning?
So it's the batter in the prior inning who had the last complete at bat, right, when the inning ended. So I think what we're trying to do here is differentiate from it is not the player who the third out was made. So let's say you have a batter hits the ball and it's a fielder's choice, and the runner from first going to second is put out for the third out. Well, the rules will say that that batter that batted, since the third out was made on a batted ball of theirs, that they completed their at bat. And so they are the ones who batted last. So you can think about it as the player in the batting order who is just prior to the batter who's coming into bat first in that inning. That's not the way they wrote the rule, but you could consider that as the interpretation.
Okay. Will the PowerPoint be made available afterwards?
Yes, so two things. We'll have a recording, we'll talk about that, and the PowerPoint will be available, probably be posted next week.
Okay. And can I make one comment?
Yes.
For those of you doing softball, the thing to consider is the 8 to 10-year-olds is the different division. And so once you get up to 9, 11-year-olds, it's not treated as minors in terms of the rules. It's the same rules that apply to Little League softball or the majors division. So it's only the 8 to 10-year-old division that uses a smaller ball, the shorter pitching distance, more visits allowed for the manager and the pitcher, etc. That's all we have, Don.
Okay, well, I appreciate your patience with an hour of rules. Before we move on to the next section, I just want to remind folks that there's no substitute for reviewing your rule book. Someone asked about the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will be available. There's a lot of content here in this PowerPoint, and some things do require a bit of content knowledge about what the slides have and what the intent of the message is. So you'll be free to review this when it's available, but I encourage you to actually go through the tournament rules in some detail if you're doing all-stars. And then for TOC to, make sure you're good with the basic rules. We also have available on our YouTube channel the rules clinics that Jim delivered for all of us in the district back in the February timeframe. Those are available also, where you can kind of review the basics of the rules and actually get into some of the more detailed applications with live examples. And if you didn't have the opportunity to participate in our rules clinics earlier. There are also available, when we talk about tournament rules, for those of you who are active in social media, you may have heard of some tournament rule cheat sheets and other things that are out there published by other Little League umpires. Probably the most popular and most well-known is published by an individual by the name of Kevin Hunter, who's in the Southeast, and he has a website and he publishes a Little League tournament cheat sheet. I want to caution you from using anything other than what we've presented tonight, or what's in the rule book, or what you're further provided through that comes from the district down to your leagues as it relates to all-stars. Sometimes some of those cheat sheets or other piece of information are not complete in their explanation, or they have they actually have errors. So we're always happy to talk about those and to refer you to good places to find the All-Star rules. But again, the All-Star rules are basically, as I said, beginning in the back of the rule book. There's about 4 sections of rules, 1 on playing rules for tournament. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Don, if I could make one point here.
Yes.
There's somebody who has their hand up. I don't know if they're not able to ask a question through chat or not. Would you like to save that to the end or deal with that now?
Well, if there's someone out there that has a question.
I could do it through chat, or what I wanted to ask was how many times for major division girls softball and boys baseball can a manager cross onto the field to talk to their pitchers before they got to pull them out?
Okay, so consistent with regular season rules, and Jim, correct me if I get this wrong. At the 9-11 and older age groups, a manager can come out once per inning. The second time they come out in that inning, the pitcher must be removed. And they have 3 on the 3rd visit in a game, that pitcher must be removed. And remember, visits go with the pitcher. So if you're in one of those divisions where the pitcher can return to the mound or to the pitching circle, we need to be tracking visits to the pitcher. So at the 8-10 level, they have 1 additional visit. So 2 in an inning, and on the 3rd in an inning, the pitcher would have to be removed, or in the 4th visit of the game, the pitcher would have to be removed. Jim, I think I got that correct, right?
You did.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Okay, let's move on now, and we're going to talk for a few minutes here about you as the umpire and what do you need to be aware of as we move into the tournament season. These aren't game protocol in terms of points of emphasis or rules. These are you as the umpire. Just as a reminder, during the All-Stars and TOC, this says All-Stars, but All-Stars and TOC, Future Stars, you represent California District 4. Yeah, you come from a local league, but you're doing this on behalf of the district. And the way we do that is we ask each league to provide umpires in support of the tournaments. You're not a local league umpire, because we don't want you to wear your local league uniform or anything else. Like, let's say you belong to another umpire association. We don't want you wearing that markings on your hat or shirt or wherever. We want you to be well dressed, and probably most importantly is you need to be impartial. You may be assigned to a game, and one of the teams in the game is a team from your league. You need to treat that just as you would any other game. You don't know, you don't know anything about that team. You just know it's the other team. One way you could do that is don't socialize with your friends, neighbors, whoever, acquaintances during the game, hanging out at the fence or chatting with them through the backstop, or let's say the manager, coach, somebody you know, don't chat with them. Be a good representative for Little League and for the district as a whole. Now, who makes for an eligible tournament umpire? I want to say this is going to be a list of things. These are our expectations. We know that not every umpire will meet all of these expectations. This is what's been communicated to the leagues through their presidents as who we ask them to nominate as a an eligible tournament umpire. Some of you may not meet all these requirements. We appreciate you joining in and being part of the umpire crew for the tournament. What I would ask you to do is, if you see something on this list that you have not done or don't met, talk to your league chief umpire about that expectation and determine for yourself if you can meet that or not, or if there's some other thing you can do working with your league chief umpire. So first of all, you should have been already approved as a volunteer by your local league. There's a specific Little League process that requires umpires to be approved before you do games in your local league. Notice this is an area where you may not even be aware of it. It may not have even happened, but this is what the expectation is. If you're an adult, you should have completed a background check. A couple different variations of that, but you should have had a criminal background check performed on your background, and the league should have reviewed that as part of their approval process. If you're not an adult, we can't perform a background check because none of your records about your prior activity are available to us. You must have been a regular season umpire for your league. Well, we don't want our umpires who show up only for tournament champions or all-stars. Being an umpire in the tournament season is to some extent a reward for good service throughout the regular season. So we're hopeful that all of you have been umpiring for your league throughout the year. And if you get assigned to a game, you should have already been umpiring that level of play. If you get assigned to softball, you should have already have experience assigning or umpiring a softball game. If you get assigned to a junior baseball game, you should not have been assigned if you only have worked minor baseball and have no experience at junior baseball. So check on what experience level you have and where you're comfortable working the game. Should have knowledge of what we use in District 4. So if you're doing a 2-umpire mechanics, we're using the basic Little League 2-umpire mechanics. We have mechanics resources available to you where you can understand what those are. If you've been to our basic mechanics clinic that we run at the district level, or most of the mechanics clinics that have been run at our league level, they're teaching the basic mechanics. If you're doing a game with more than 2 umpires, we encourage you to use what will be published in the next few days on our district website related to umpire mechanics. Certainly, you may get assigned to a game with umpires from another league. So an umpire from one league, an umpire from another league. That creates some challenges, but if you're all using the basic umpire mechanics, you'll have a common knowledge of what you're supposed to do. You should have completed the required training. So here's a list of the required training: concussion awareness, youth sports abuse, and sudden cardiac arrest. So in California, the concussion awareness and the sudden cardiac arrest training are required trainings for youth sports volunteers. Youth sports abuse, the Safe Sports program, is a Little League safety program that's required. So talk to your chief umpire about these and see if you can get, they each take about 20-30 minutes. They're not very complicated. It's not a pass fail, if you will. It's awareness training. You should agree to not take cash payments. So this is a volunteer umpire situation. If you are a youth umpire and you have been receiving cash payments of some sort from your league to umpire, have a discussion with your chief umpire about what they expect to do for you if you umpire in the tournaments. The expectation is that you would do it as a volunteer for fun and for the good of the program, but we also know that that may not really be reality. And so this expectation is something you need to deal with within your league. If you're an adult, I hope you're not taking cash to umpire Little League games under any circumstance. We also know that's not 100% realistic. If you are, we would ask during the tournament time that you not take cash payments. You may do something where you work out with your league to have them provide you additional equipment or something else in lieu, well, in return for you volunteering to umpire games. And at the end, we want you to be recommended by your league chief umpire and your president. We think you've done that. If you're on board here tonight, you probably have already passed that recommendation step. The last is, if you're not already a member of the Little League Umpire Registry, we encourage you to join. There's lots of good resources, training materials, other things. If you join the Little League Umpire Registry, you can find that on the Little League website by searching for Umpire Registry. I mentioned the training. So if you have a question about where do I find the concussion training, the abuse awareness, sudden cardiac arrest. So if you go to the District 4 website, California District 4 littleleague.org, you will see this page and click on forms. The page may look a little bit different than this exact example, but you will find a required training section that with links to how to complete the training. Where do you go to find other information? So what can we help you with in terms of umpire information? I already talked about the rule book. So have the rule book. I encourage getting the rule book app loaded onto your remote device. It's free. It's available for Android and iOS devices, free. We also have the District 4 on the District 4 website. We have an umpire page. Many of you probably went there perhaps to register for this. We have a page with umpire publication manuals that give the mechanics guides. There's going to be some updating on this over the next week, but a lot of really good information is there. And then in the middle of this slide is a picture of our YouTube channel, California District 4 Little League Umpires YouTube channel, where we have many videos that cover rules training, tournament procedures, mechanics, other things. I really encourage you to check that out. We've already got like 250, 275 followers who subscribe to our channel from people all over the country. So we're excited. We think it's a great resource if you want to reach out and take advantage of it. What do I do about uniforms? Because remember I said you're not a local league umpire. I don't want you wearing your local league cap or local league shirt. Your crew should match. The easiest way is you all wear a shirt that looks something like those shirts in the lower right. Or they don't have to look like that. They just have to match. These shirts are actually fairly inexpensive. You talk to your league chief umpire, have them buy it for you as part of their commitment to you for working the tournament games. We'd like you to have the Little League patch. The new patch is the one that's on the right at the top of the slide. If you have an older shirt and it has the older patch, the one on the left, that's acceptable. The cap must be the California 4 cap with Carolina blue. Again, don't wear your local league caps. I'm aware that all the league chief umpires have been purchasing caps for use by their umpires during the tournament season, so talk to them. There's a few other things we'd like the uniform to be. Do your best. Don't go out and buy a whole bunch of uniform pieces to do 2 tournament games. But please, when you go to a game, make sure that you all match. Note what's not on here. Shorts, open-toed shoes. Those are not acceptable as an umpire in tournament time. You go to a game, bring everything, because there may be 2 umpires on the game and the other umpire gets injured during the game, or the other umpire doesn't show up. And so you thought you were going to do the bases, and now you got to do the plate. So be prepared. Before the game, you're going to find out what your assignment is, so you'll know. Keep monitoring for changes. Check the District 4 website, follow the brackets, what's happening. Talk to your partner the night before. You should know who your partner is. Find out where you're going to meet, what uniform you're going to wear. Make sure your uniform's clean, your shoes are ready. And then get ready for the game by knowing the rules for the level of play. Is it TOC or All Stars or Future Stars? Am I doing 8-10? Am I doing 10-12? What am I doing? Arrive early, bring your uniforms, and make sure you know how to get a hold of your partner. When you get to the field, locate the tournament director. They're pretty easy to find. You ask somebody, are you the tournament director? They usually say no. No way I'd ever be the tournament director. That's that person over there that's doing all the work. So make sure the tournament director knows you're there, you're ready to umpire their game. Find out if your partner's around, and if you are 2 youth umpires on the game, find your game coordinator. Now, 2 youth umpires can only work TOC games. All Stars and Future Stars, there will be at least 1 adult on your crew. Have a pregame with your partners. I don't want to cover the things you cover. You should be having pre-games in your umpire assignments now. Make sure you're ready to do the game, and then decide what's going to happen after the game. This says decide your post-game meal, but decide how you're going to exit the field and where you're going to meet after the game. Stay together when you go on the field. Go on the field 25 minutes before the game. Inspect the equipment. We talked about what the equipment standards were earlier. Ask the manager to put all the equipment outside for you. Do not go in the dugout and start pulling equipment out of equipment bags. Have the manager put all the equipment outside for you. Check the field, make sure the field's in good condition, or find areas that need to be fixed. And then a good thing to do is to watch the team warm-ups. See what level of play you've got, what skill level, and are there any issues with the teams. There's going to be a pregame ceremony. It's going to vary from location to location. These are some of the elements that will most likely be included in your games. They'll be, they'll introduce players, introduce others, introduce you. There'll be a national anthem, Little League pledge. Stand out of the way, back behind the batter's box, facing the flag, and put your hand over your heart during the national anthem. You will have a pregame meeting with the managers prior to the start of the game, 5 minutes before the game. You'll introduce yourself to the managers. They will introduce themselves to you. You'll verify the lineups using the lineup card. Each team will give you a lineup card. You're going to check that lineup card for these elements that are listed. Make sure you ask the manager, are your players properly equipped for Little League baseball or softball today? They must say yes, or we're not going to play the game. Most of them will know the answer is yes. So, but make sure you ask. Confirm any ground rules. Then tell the home team manager to take the field. This whole meeting should take like a minute or 2 minutes. Don't make it a long meeting. Point of emphasis, teams, all players, coaches must be in the dugout until the plate meeting has completed. If there are captains that have come up with the managers to the plate meeting, keep them at the plate meeting. But have all the other players inside the dugout, not outside swinging bats, not throwing balls. They are to be in the dugout. The game hasn't started. Between innings, I said earlier, stay away from spectators. Base umpire, position yourself in the outfield, away from everybody. Away from who? You're away from the dugouts. You just made the third out call for one of those dugouts, and they may not be pleased with what you called. So don't go anywhere near the dugouts. Stay in the outfield. Plate umpire, be on the foul line. Keep the game moving, 1 minute in between innings. When the game ends, get off the field. The game is not over until you leave the field of play. So a manager could protest something, but if you get off the field promptly, the game is over. Go to your post-game location, wherever that is. If you are 2 youth umpires in a TOC game, make sure the game coordinator goes with you to your post-game location. Don't hang out by the snack bar waiting to get your hot dog and a soda. They'll bring it to you if they really want to get one to you. Have a post-game, talk about how the game went. Most importantly, was I a good partner today? And then afterwards, send me an email or call me and tell me if there was any issues during the game. I like to hear game reports. So if we have a suspended game, remember we talked about what happens in a suspended game. Real simple. You have your lineup cards, the plate umpire, you're going to make sure it's all filled out properly. You're going to give it to the tournament director. They're going to bundle everything, and that's going to go to the next game site, wherever the game's going to be finished. And you may or may not be doing that game. My job is to figure out how to get umpires to the suspended game resumption. But please let me know that there was a suspended game. Lineup cards, new lineup cards for this tournament season. There's 2 versions, one for continuous batting order and one for batting 9. I'm not going to go through these in detail here. The instructions will be posted on our District 4 website. But the lineup cards will be provided by the tournament director. Just make sure they're properly filled out and that you use them to keep track of what happens during the game. Notice this is a continuous batting order example of a game that went 6 innings, lots of action, lots of scoring, but notice the plate umpire had very few marks to make on their lineup card, as opposed to a lineup card that goes 6 innings where we're keeping track of substitutions. Notice in this example with a batting 9, there's many, many more markups. So the instructions will be posted on our District 4 umpire resource page in the next few days. How do you get assigned to a game? Again, remember, your chief umpire nominated you. I'm personally responsible for the quality and assignments of all the umpires, but I've delegated that to your chief umpire, and I have confidence in them that they're picking umpires that can do the job for us. Game assignments are made in the umpire scheduler web tool. I said earlier, umpires may come from different leagues. You may have 2, 3, or 4 umpires. Your chief umpire should already have asked you for this information so they can populate you in the umpire scheduler. A cell phone contact information, email. Do you need, you have any limits on getting to games? Are you youth or adult? How quick can you be available if we need you in a hurry? And then I've already covered the game assignment rules prior. So we have this umpire scheduler tool. So if you've been set up in the scheduler by your chief umpire, you should have received an email saying you've been set up, and you can go to this link to access the scheduler. That is the website for the web address for the scheduler. But like I said, if you get set up or you were previously set up, you should be able to access this now. You're able to see all the games that are upcoming, how many umpires are assigned to each game currently. You're able to see your personal assignments, games that you're assigned to, and past games. So lots of good information in the scheduler. Notice under my games, there's nothing in my game list there at the bottom because I haven't been assigned to a game yet. This kind of summarizes what I talked about the scheduler. Just remember, things can happen. You say, well, it's not going to rain in June. Well, June 2011, it rained. So we never know what's going to happen. And we encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to work in crew sizes larger than you're used to in regular season, as long as you can get your crew ready for 2 or 3 or 4 umpires. Where do I find the tournament schedules? On the District 4 website. The tournament schedules are under tournaments. There's a page for tournament champions and a page for all-stars. And each bracket is there for each tournament. Okay. Jim, do we have any questions remaining? I covered that last quickly, but now are there questions on anything we've covered tonight?
You have one question. Should the Little League patch be on a specific shoulder, left or right?
So the Little League patch goes on the left shoulder, and it's kind of centered on the sleeve.
That's all done.
Okay, I want to thank folks for joining us tonight, and I hope you have a great tournament season. And I'm looking forward to the 180 some games that we have to play over the next 6 weeks. And each of you can be involved in that. Again, as I said, I rely upon our group of chief umpires to make this all happen. I do want to remind everybody again, this is just a game, right? It's a game played between 2 teams of youth, and it's to be fun. If you think about it, what you see in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, in the Little League World Series, there might be 5,000 teams that start playing, and they work down to 20 teams over 2 months. So what's the chance that a team you're umpiring in our tournament is going to make it to the Little League World Series in Williamsport? It's pretty slim. Or is a team you're umpiring going to end up in Greenville, North Carolina at the Softball World Series? You know, it's possible, but not likely. So just remember that as you do your games. It's a great opportunity to be part of the International All-Stars or even the Tournament of Champions. Great memories are made for our players. So thanks again. This will be recorded. This video has been recorded, and it'll be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight, spending a couple hours with us.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. Good night.
Thanks, Don. Good night.
Thank you all.